I want to talk today about the argument between those who say there is a God and those who say there is not a God. Of course, this argument has been going on for thousands of years, millions of years, I don't know, however long the world's been in existence, right? However long there's been people, and however long people have existed, that's how long this argument's going on. So it's kind of funny to see us arguing about it today, thinking that, well, maybe we can figure something out that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Assyrians and the ancient Bithynian, all these people didn't figure out, right? Why? Because we have more technology? Who knows, right? Are we smarter? Are we evolved? No. We're really not. I have a friend back in Nevada who says that we're actually devolving, not evolving, and I tend to agree with him, but what do I know? Again, I'm just a redneck from Nevada. So, anyways, regarding this argument, is there any value in arguing this? Well, the people who believe in God and who know that there's a God would say, well, of course there's value in arguing it because I know there's a God and we want to honor him and we want people to know about him. Now, that's understandable. But if you think back, tell you what, I'll use myself as an example first. I'm thinking back, okay? When I was 17, I honestly didn't know if there was a God. I remember it as clear as it was yesterday. This is 30 years ago. And I remember sitting on my porch back in Nevada, just going, wow, I just don't know if there's a God or not, you know? How was I supposed to know? I'd been taught there was when I was a kid, and I believed in Jesus when I was a kid, but I turned 17, or turned some teen, and it went away. I don't know why. But for whatever reason, I just didn't know. And what was it that made me realize that there was a God? Was it somebody arguing with me? No. Was it somebody preaching to me? No. Was it my mom bringing me to church? No. Was it some very, very smart person who was able to prove it to me out of the Bible? No. Was it some very, 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 very smart person who was able to prove it to me using logic and reason? Nope. What was it that helped me realize that there was a God? It was God. So, that being the case, I agree with my friend Chad, who lives in Nevada, who sent me a text today that says the only way that people's eyes spiritually are opened is for God to do it. And I agree with that. The only way that any of us ever know there's a God is by God. It's never, as far as I can tell, because of anybody arguing with them. Right? I've done it. Again, I indict myself first here. You know, I'm always the first to admit that I've done it. I've made this mistake. And this is the choir preaching. How do we sound, right? Did it ever work? No. No, it sure didn't. It really didn't. No matter what strategies I used, no matter what arguments I gave, it never worked. And I just asked the question, does all this arguing about it on YouTube or anywhere else that we see, does it work? Have you ever proved it to anybody? Has anybody come around to your way of thinking? Either way, those who are trying to prove God and those who are trying to prove that God doesn't exist. You ever convinced anybody? You ever converted anybody? Have you? I imagine it's happened. You know, it's not, stranger things have happened in the world, and this is the world, and trying to explain everything that happens in it or everything that doesn't happen is a is a stretch. Say hi, Max. But, Max, you put your butt in the camera. Come here, Max. The point is that all of our arguments about trying to prove God or disprove God are worthless. Like, what value is in that? What value is there in trying to prove that God exists? Well, I suppose it makes you feel like you're serving God and you're doing the right thing, and I understand that because I've done it. And on the other side of the coin, you could say, well, we're trying to lead people to reason and to common sense and to reality, right? By proving God doesn't exist. I understand that too. So I understand. Those are a few of the reasons. I'm sure you have more than that. Okay, I understand. I'm not trying to limit you. I don't know you. I don't understand what goes on in your mind. I'm sure you think way more than I know, obviously. But those are just a few examples. So, but beyond that, like, again, I asked the question, have you ever succeeded? For the most part, what I can see, most people don't succeed at that. There's no success in trying to argue for God or argue against God. So where's the value? The value, again, people, is moving off of that knowledge of good and evil platform. You know, knowledge. All knowledge does, not all knowledge does. Okay, let me back up. When we're trying to argue our point and make and prove that we're right against somebody else, there's no value in that, right? There's just no value in it, because what happens if you prove yourself right? You feel good about yourself, you feed your pride, then the other person is lessened in your eyes and in other people's eyes, and so you're up here and they're down here. And of course that's an illusion anyways, because we're all human beings on the same planet, we're all in the same boat. So then that puts you in an unrealistic state. And when you're in an unrealistic state of pride, well, then you're setting yourself up for a fall anyways. And these people over here are just humiliated, and that's not love. And there's no love and there's no life in that process. And love and life is what we're supposed to be about in life, right? Right? So I suppose there are those few rare cases where you actually convince somebody that there is a God. And if you've done that, more power to you. I'm obviously not getting on your case for that. And there are probably those few cases where people have convinced people that there's no God. In which case, well, the person's faith was obviously not very realistic in the first place to be able to convince. Because for me, knowing that there's a God, it's a spiritual thing, right? It's not a mental thing. How do I know there's a God? Because God spiritually showed himself to me. If God doesn't show himself to you spiritually, then mentally, the mental logical arguments are not going to help you at all. Okay? So to come to understand that there is a God, it takes God himself. Since God is spirit, okay? Jesus said it very clearly. He said God is spirit, and those who worship, which is just another word for knowing him and honoring him. It's just Bible jargon, but must do it in spirit. So if somebody hasn't had a spiritual awakening, to use a politically correct term these days, a hip term, then how are they going to know there's a God? Mentally? No, you can't. You can't just convince yourself mentally. Maybe some of you have. Again, I maintain humility that a lot more things have happened to people in life than I'm aware of, okay? But generally speaking, the people I know and the stories that I've heard, nobody's ever been mentally convinced. You need God, who is a spiritual being, to show you spiritually that he exists. Which is how I know that there's a God, because I see him spiritually. Right? The rest of you who believe in God and you know Christ and you know God, you can say the same, right? It's a spiritual thing. It's not a mental thing. I don't know. So anyways, the main point is that in life, here's the main point. In life, it's a waste of time to argue with people to prove your point. There's no value in that. What's valuable in life is getting other people to life through love. And if you're not doing that, there's just no value in it. The only value is that it feeds people's thirst for knowledge and to watch people go at each other and to, it feeds this unhealthy thing where we like to watch people argue and we like to prove our point and we like to take sides, because we want to fight. It's like, you know what? That kind of mindset, that kind of approach to life, that whole Democrat and Republican, liberal, conservative, God, no God, there's no value in it. There's no value in living there. The only value in life is life through love. You got to get off of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, tree being a metaphor for a source of sustenance, spiritually and mentally. Okay? When you're living on the knowledge of good and evil, and that's sustaining you, it just divides you from other people, and it doesn't produce love, and it doesn't produce life. What's the best way to convince people that there's a God? Love them. Really. Just love them. That convinces people that there's a God.